It was past midnight on a lonely stretch of highway, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. A cold wind swept through the empty road, carrying the faint hum of streetlights that flickered in and out of life. And then, out of the darkness, a broken-down car stood stranded on the roadside, its hazard lights blinking weakly, like a cry for help in the middle of nowhere. Inside sat a young woman, trembling, her phone battery dead, her face illuminated only by the glow of the dashboard. She had been driving back from her late shift at the hospital when her car gave up on her. Every minute felt like an hour. Every shadow felt like danger. And just when she whispered a desperate prayer for help, headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Hope, because stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of goodness can change a life forever. The man who stopped that night was named Ethan Cole. He was in his early 30s, a mechanic by trade, though lately, he hadn't been working much. His small repair shop on the edge of town was barely surviving. Business had dried up after a new auto service chain opened nearby, and debts were piling up faster than he could pay them. But despite his struggles, Ethan was the kind of man who couldn't ignore someone in trouble. He noticed the stranded car from afar and pulled over without hesitation, stepping out into the cold with his flashlight and worn tool bag. The young woman, Lena, felt a wave of relief and fear all at once. The night had been long, and the road empty, so when a stranger approached, her instinct screamed to lock the doors. But when she saw his tired face, the oil-stained hands, and the gentle calm in his voice, she rolled down her window just enough to speak. Ethan asked what had happened, took a quick look, and realized the issue: a failed alternator and a dying battery. He could fix it temporarily enough to get her home, though it meant working in the cold for nearly an hour under a dim flashlight. So he did. Without complaint. Without question. As he worked, Lena watched him quietly. His jacket was thin for the chill, his fingers red from the cold. He looked like someone carrying more than just physical exhaustion, like life had been unfair to him for far too long. When he finally got the car running again, she immediately reached for her wallet, insisting he take payment. But Ethan shook his head with a tired smile and said softly, "Just promise me you'll get home safe. That's enough." Lena didn't know what to say. She offered again, almost pleading, but he refused. He simply wiped his hands, gave her a small nod, and drove off in his old pickup that coughed and sputtered into the night. It wasn't until he disappeared that she realized she never even got his last name. For Ethan, that night was just another act of decency in a life that often went unnoticed. The next day, he returned to his routine, struggling to keep his shop open, arguing with the landlord over delayed rent, and wondering how much longer he could hold on. His father had built that small repair shop decades ago, teaching him everything about engines, honesty, and hard work. But times had changed. Customers now wanted fast, cheap fixes. The loyalty his father had earned with handshakes and trust no longer seemed to matter. Bills mounted. His electricity was cut off twice. His phone buzzed constantly with overdue notices. Yet, even then, Ethan couldn't bring himself to cheat anyone or overcharge. "I fix cars," he'd tell himself, "not people's pockets." But that integrity came at a price. One evening, about a month later, Ethan sat in his dimly lit workshop, staring at a foreclosure notice pinned to the wall. It said he had 7 days to vacate. 7 days until he lost everything his father had built. He leaned back against an old workbench, eyes closed, and let the weight of defeat sink in. Maybe it was time to give up. Maybe decency had no place in a world that rewarded convenience over compassion. And then, just as he was about to close the shop early, he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. A shiny black SUV stopped in front, and a woman stepped out. Ethan recognized her immediately. It was Lena. She smiled as she approached, holding something in her hands. "You probably don't remember me," she began, but you helped me one night on Route 47. My car broke down, and you refused to take any money." Ethan's tired eyes flickered with faint recognition. "I remember," he said. "I'm just glad you made it home safe." "I did," she said softly. "And I've been meaning to find you since then." Before Ethan could respond, Lena walked into the shop and looked around. Her gaze landed on the outdated tools, the peeling paint, the empty customer chairs. She could see the quiet struggle written everywhere, in the fading sign outside, the worn floor, and the man who had saved her without asking for anything in return. "I didn't just want to thank you," she continued. "I wanted to tell you something." She paused, taking a breath before speaking again. "My father runs one of the largest automobile service companies in the state. He's been searching for someone honest to manage a new branch, someone who treats people like you do." Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. Lena smiled at his disbelief and handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter of employment, an offer to become the head mechanic and operations manager at a new service center, complete with a salary far higher than he'd ever dreamed of and a clause that allowed him to maintain partial ownership after a year. He was speechless. For a moment, he simply stared at the paper, then at her. "Why would you do this for me?" he asked quietly. "Because," Lena said with emotion thick in her voice, "you helped me when you didn't have to. You showed me what genuine kindness looks like. My father always said good people are hard to find, and that night, I found one." Tears stung Ethan's eyes. For months, he had been sinking under the weight of hopelessness, questioning whether being good still mattered in a world full of indifference. And now, standing there with that letter in his hands, he realized, sometimes goodness takes a while to come back, but it always does. Within weeks, Ethan's life changed completely. He joined Lena's father's company, not as an employee, but as a valued partner. He oversaw a team of mechanics, trained them with the same honesty his father had taught him, and turned the new branch into one of the most trusted service centers in the region. The shop that once echoed with loneliness now buzzed with purpose. And true to his nature, Ethan never let success change who he was. He kept a framed photo of his old repair shop on his new office wall, a constant reminder of the nights he almost gave up, and the kindness that saved him. Months later, on a quiet evening, Lena stopped by his office. She had just returned from another hospital shift, exhausted but smiling. Ethan greeted her warmly, offering her coffee. "You really did change my life," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Lena shook her head. "No, Ethan. You changed mine first." That night, as she left, Ethan stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the road, the same road where their fates had first crossed. He realized then that sometimes, life doesn't reward goodness immediately. Sometimes it waits, testing your faith, pushing you to the edge, only to return your kindness tenfold when you least expect it. He thought about all the times he had questioned himself, all the nights he'd sat alone wondering if his honesty was worth the struggle. And he finally understood that even when the world forgets kindness, kindness never forgets you. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Hope. Every engagement helps us spread real stories that remind the world that compassion still exists. Before the story ends, we have a special request. Comment below what kindness means to you, and if you've ever experienced a small act of goodness that changed your life, share it. You never know who your story might inspire. Because sometimes, a simple act, like fixing a stranger's car late at night, can ripple through the world in ways you can't imagine. Ethan's story isn't just about luck or reward, it's about faith in doing good, even when no one's watching. It's about holding on when the world feels cold, and trusting that one day, your light will be seen. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there will come along, not to pay you back, but to change your fate forever.